I still dream about the sound of it sometimes, not the crash, but the sound it made when it was alive. It was a low, guttural growl that started deep in its belly, a promise of violence and beauty all wrapped up in one perfect mechanical chord. When you'd press the ignition, the whole world would vibrate for a second, a brief tremor to announce that something magnificent had just woken up. That sound was the anthem of my success, the culmination of a decade of my life spent chasing a dream. Now the only sound I hear at night is the hum of an old refrigerator and the distant sigh of traffic, and I know that the silence is the price I paid for that beautiful noise. Before the car, my life was a study in delayed gratification. I wasn't a banker or a tech mogul. I ran a small but successful commercial landscaping business. I was the guy who made the office parks and suburban developments look pristine. It was hard, physical work. My days started before sunrise, my hands were perpetually calloused, and I smelled of fresh-cut grass and diesel fuel. I built the business from a single rusty pickup truck and a second-hand lawnmower. Every dollar we made was a testament to sweat and sacrifice. My wife and I were a team. She handled the books, our family budget, with the precision of a surgeon. She was the queen of spreadsheets and sensible decisions. We lived in a modest but comfortable house, the kind of place where kids can run in the backyard and the mortgage is manageable. Our savings account grew slowly, steadily, a quiet monument to our discipline. That account was our fortress. It was our kids' college education, our retirement, our insurance against the uncertainties of the world. It was the physical manifestation of 1,000 times we said no to a fancy vacation, a bigger TV, or an expensive dinner out. We were building a future, one blade of grass at a time. But a man can only say no so many times before a little bit of poison starts to seep into his soul. The poison for me was the Mercedes-Benz CLS63 AMG. It wasn't just a car. It was an escape pod from my ordinary life. It was a rolling piece of sculpture, a four-door coupe with the heart of a ravenous beast. It was everything my rusty pickup truck was not: elegant, powerful, and utterly, beautifully unnecessary. It started as a harmless fantasy. I'd watch videos of it online, the sound of its V8 engine roaring through my cheap computer speakers. I'd read the breathless reviews, memorizing the horsepower figures, the 0 to 60 times. I'd configure my dream version on the Mercedes website, picking the perfect shade of metallic gray, the carbon fiber trim, the Napa leather interior. It became an obsession, a secret god I worshipped in the quiet hours after my family was asleep. The landscaping business had a record year. A few big contracts came through, and suddenly our savings account, our fortress, looked bigger than ever. The number on the screen seemed to mock me. It was a huge pile of responsible, sensible, boring money. The voice of my obsession whispered, "What is it all for? All this work, all this sacrifice, if not for this one perfect thing?" I started to rationalize the purchase. It wasn't an expense. It was an investment in my own happiness, a reward for a decade of grinding work. I told myself it was a marvel of German engineering, a car so well built it would be an asset, not a liability. My fantasy wasn't just about the speed. It was about a trouble-free ownership, a perfect machine that would never betray me. I saw myself driving it for years, a timeless classic, a family heirloom even. I began to talk about it with my wife. At first, she just laughed, dismissing it as one of my silly daydreams. But as I grew more serious, her expression changed. She would bring up her spreadsheets, our budget, the college funds. She was the guardian of our fortress, and she saw my obsession for what it was, a cannon aimed squarely at its walls. We had our first real fights about it. I was emotional, passionate, speaking of dreams and rewards. She was logical, calm, speaking of risk management and responsibility. "It's just a car," she'd say, and it felt like she was stabbing me in the heart. It wasn't just a car, it was the symbol of everything I had ever worked for. In the end, I broke her down. My relentless, obsessive desire wore through her sensible defenses, or maybe she just got tired of fighting. I think a part of her wanted to see me happy, to see that decade of sacrifice result in something more exciting than a number on a spreadsheet. She finally, reluctantly, agreed. Walking into that dealership was an out-of-body experience. The air smelled of expensive leather and air freshener. The cars sat on the polished floor like sleeping predators. And there it was in the center of the showroom, my car. It was even more beautiful in person. The transaction itself was a blur. I remember signing a mountain of paperwork. I remember the salesman's predatory smile. And I remember the moment I transferred the money. A life savings, our entire fortress, emptied in a single, silent digital transaction. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of my life. Driving it off the lot, the deep rumble of the engine vibrating through my bones, I felt like a king. I had done it. I had reached the top of my own personal mountain. I brought it home, and the kids were ecstatic, their small hands tracing the sleek lines of the car. My wife stood on the porch, a forced smile on her face. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the look of a woman who had just watched the man she trusted detonate the foundations of their life. I ignored it. I was high on the fumes of my own achievement. That first night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the garage, in the driver's seat, the narcotic scent of the new leather filling my lungs. I ran my hands over the cold, metal paddle shifters. I was safe. I was successful. I was invincible. I had my perfect machine, and in my deluded fantasy, I believed it would never, ever let me down. The first few months of owning the CLS63 were pure, uncut bliss. It was the honeymoon phase, and I was the most infatuated groom in the world. Every morning, I'd wake up before the sun, not with the weary resignation of a man heading to a long day of physical labor, but with the giddy excitement of a kid on Christmas morning. I'd go to the garage just to look at it, a gleaming gray predator resting in the dim light. I'd trace the lines of its body with my fingertips, a silent communion with my mechanical god. Driving it was a daily event. A trip to the grocery store became a lap at Le Mans. The on-ramp to the highway was my personal launch pad. The power was intoxicating, a tidal wave of torque that pushed me back into the buttery soft leather of the seat. The world outside the acoustically insulated glass seemed to move in slow motion, a silent film that I was the star of. It changed how I felt about myself. When I was behind the wheel, I wasn't the guy who smelled of fertilizer and two-stroke oil. I was a man of substance, a man who had made it. The appreciative glances from other drivers, the way people would turn their heads as I rumbled past, it was all a validation of my choice, a confirmation that I had purchased not just a car, but a new, better version of myself. My wife even started to come around, or so I told myself. She admitted it was a beautiful car, and on the few occasions we took it out for a drive together, I could see a flicker of a genuine smile on her face as the acceleration pushed her gently into her seat. The kids loved it, of course. To them, it was a spaceship, the coolest car in the entire world. We were a family in a car commercial, cruising down a sun-drenched road, living a perfect life. But even in paradise, there are snakes. The first snake was the insurance bill. I had gotten a quote beforehand, but the final bill was somehow significantly higher. It was an eye-watering number, more than the monthly mortgage payment on our first house. I swallowed hard and paid it, telling myself it was the price of protecting a valuable asset. The second snake was the gas mileage. I knew a twin-turbo V8 wouldn't be economical, but the reality was shocking. The car didn't sip premium fuel, it shotgunned it. The friendly chimes of the gas pump became a constant, mocking reminder of the car's thirst. I started creating a separate mental budget for the car, a shadow budget that I kept from my wife, a place where I could hide the true cost of my dream. The third and most venomous snake was the first service. A service, basically an oil change and a series of inspections, cost nearly $1,000. $1,000 for an oil change. I remember looking at the itemized bill, my hands trembling slightly. The service advisor, a man in a crisp white lab coat, explained the costs with a condescending patience, as if he were speaking to a simpleton who couldn't possibly understand the intricacies of high-performance German engineering. I paid the bill with a credit card, the first time in years I hadn't been able to pay for a car-related expense with cash. A small, hairline crack appeared in my fantasy of trouble-free ownership. I started to feel the strain. The car's expenses were a constant, low-level hum of anxiety beneath the joy of driving it. We stopped going out to dinner. The family vacation we had been planning was quietly postponed. I started taking on extra landscaping jobs, working weekends, grinding even harder than before, not to build our savings back up, but just to feed the hungry beast in my garage. The car was no longer just a reward. It was a second job. The accident happened on a Tuesday in October. The air was crisp, the leaves were turning, and the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. I had just finished a long, grueling day on a big commercial project. I was tired, but the moment I slipped into the driver's seat of the CLS63, the fatigue melted away, replaced by the familiar thrill. I had to pick up my son from soccer practice, a simple, mundane trip. But in that car, no trip was mundane. On the way, I found myself on a beautiful, winding back road. There was no one around. I could feel the car begging me to open it up just a little. The voice of my obsession whispered, "This is what you bought it for." So I did. I dropped it down a gear with a satisfying click of the paddle shifter. The engine roared, the exhaust barked, and the car surged forward. I wasn't driving recklessly, not really, just spiritedly. I was feeling the car becoming one with the machine, a master of my universe. I came into a sharp, blind corner a little too fast. For a split second, I felt the rear tires lose traction on a patch of loose gravel. A flicker of adrenaline, a moment of pure, stupid male ego, I corrected maybe a little too aggressively. The car's advanced traction control system, the one I had read so much about, the one that was supposed to be foolproof, couldn't defy the laws of physics. The back end of the car swung out, and suddenly I was a passenger. The world became a nauseating, slow-motion blur of green and blue. I remember the sickening crunch of metal against wood as the car left the road and slammed sideways into a massive oak tree. The sound wasn't loud. It was a dull, final thud, the sound of a dream dying. The airbags exploded, filling the cabin with a cloud of acrid white powder. And then silence. A deafening, absolute silence, broken only by the faint, cheerful dinging of a warning chime, telling me that my passenger side door was ajar. I sat there for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs, the smell of gunpowder and hot metal filling my lungs. I wasn't hurt, not a scratch. The car had protected me, its crumple zones and safety cage doing their job perfectly. I stumbled out of the car and saw the damage. It was catastrophic. The entire passenger side was concave, the beautiful, flowing lines of the car twisted into a grotesque grammar of failure. The rear wheel was bent at a sickening angle. Fluids were dripping from the undercarriage, forming a dark, greasy puddle on the fallen leaves. My perfect machine was broken, mangled, violated, and it was my fault, my stupid, pointless, arrogant fault. A farmer in a pickup truck was the first to stop. He looked at me, then at the car, then back at me. He just shook his head slowly. "Son," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, "you are one lucky and one stupid son of a bitch." As I stood on the side of that quiet country road, waiting for the tow truck that would haul away the wreckage of my life's savings, all I could think about was my son, waiting for me at the soccer field, wondering where his father was. And for the first time, I realized that my beautiful, invincible dream car had not only failed to protect me, it had actively betrayed me. The immediate aftermath of the crash was a surreal fog of logistics and shame. The tow truck driver, a man with a face that had seen 1,000 such follies, winched my broken dream onto his flatbed with a practiced, indifferent efficiency. Watching it get hauled away, its sleek body twisted and maimed, felt like watching a loved one being taken to the morgue. I was found at fault, a simple, undeniable fact. I had lost control. There was no one else to blame. That night, telling my wife was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. I saw the sequence of emotions play across her face. First, a wave of relief that I was unharmed, followed by a flicker of fear, and then, finally, a quiet, cold, and utterly devastating "I told you so" that she was too kind to say out loud but was present in every line of her tense, disappointed face. The insurance nightmare began the next day. I had good insurance, I thought. I had paid the exorbitant premiums. I was covered. But insurance companies are not in the business of charity. They are in the business of managed risk, and they excel at managing their own. My policy had a clause buried deep in the fine print about performance driving and negligence. Because I was alone on a winding road and had admitted to the officer that I was driving spiritedly, they had a foothold. They wouldn't deny the claim outright, but they would fight it, investigate it, and delay it, all while the meter was running. The first estimate for the repairs came from the official Mercedes-Benz certified collision center. I remember opening the email and feeling the air leave my lungs. The number was astronomical, more than half of what I had paid for the car. The structural damage was extensive. The cost of the specialized aluminum parts and the factory-trained labor was enough to buy a brand new, sensible family sedan. The insurance company balked. Their initial offer was a fraction of the estimate. They claimed the car was a total loss and offered me a settlement based on a market value that was mysteriously, significantly lower than what I had paid just a few months prior. The number they offered wouldn't even cover what I still owed on the loan I had taken out to cover the taxes and fees of the initial purchase. I was trapped. I had a massive debt on a car that was a heap of scrap metal, and an insurance payout that wouldn't even clear the debt, let alone replace the car or the savings I had vaporized. This is where my rational mind should have cut its losses. The smart move, the one my wife pleaded with me to make, was to take the insurance money, whatever it was, sell the wreck for salvage, and use the combined funds to pay off as much of the loan as possible. It would have meant accepting a catastrophic financial loss, but it would have been a clean cut. It would have stopped the bleeding. But I wasn't rational. I was an addict in withdrawal. I couldn't let go. The car wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of my success, and to let it die would be to admit that my success was a fraud. I made the fatal decision to fix it. I took the insurance settlement, which was just enough to give me a glimmer of false hope, and decided to have the car repaired at an independent body shop that specialized in high-end European cars. Their estimate was much lower than the dealership's, but it was still a breathtaking sum. It would require every penny of the insurance money, plus a significant amount out of my own pocket, a pocket that was now empty. So I started to borrow. First, a personal loan from the bank, secured against the business that was already feeling the strain of my financial distraction. Then I maxed out our credit cards. The interest rates were predatory, but I was desperate. I was throwing good money after bad, doubling down on a losing bet, convinced I could still win. The car sat in that independent shop for months. It became a source of constant, grinding stress. There were always delays. Parts were on backorder from Germany. The specialized frame-pulling machine they needed was broken. The technician working on my car quit. Every phone call was a new problem, a new excuse, a new demand for more money. The car had become a financial black hole, and it was sucking my entire life into it. The strain at home became unbearable. The family budget, once a source of pride and security, was now a work of fiction. Every dollar I earned from my landscaping business was funneled into the black hole. We were living on credit, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the walls were closing in. My wife and I stopped talking. We only communicated in tense, monosyllabic bursts about overdue bills and final notices. The joy had been completely leached from our home, replaced by a thick, suffocating atmosphere of anxiety and resentment. The car, the thing I had bought to bring me happiness, had become a malignant tumor in the heart of my family. I was working myself to the bone, taking on any job I could, trying to outearn my own stupidity. But it was never enough. The business started to suffer. I was distracted, exhausted, making mistakes. I lost a few key clients. My reputation for reliability, the one thing I had built my business on, was beginning to tarnish. I was so focused on fixing the broken symbol of my past success that I was actively destroying my actual present source of income. One night, my wife sat me down at the kitchen table. She didn't shout. Her voice was quiet, eerily calm. She had a stack of papers in front of her, the credit card statements, the loan agreements, the overdue bills. She had done the math. She showed me the numbers, the stark, brutal reality of our situation. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. We were about to lose the house. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "It's not a car anymore, it's a disease. And it's killing us. It's killing you. You have to choose. It's the car or it's us." I looked at her, at the woman I loved, her face etched with a pain and exhaustion that I had put there. And in my deluded, broken mind, I honestly believed that if I could just fix the car, I could fix everything else. I believed that bringing it back to life, shiny and perfect, would somehow erase the mistake and restore the life we had lost. "I can't stop now," I whispered, the most selfish and destructive words I have ever spoken. "I'm too close." She just nodded slowly, a look of profound, final sadness in her eyes. She got up from the table and went upstairs. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my marriage died, another casualty of the crash. I had made my choice. I had chosen a machine over my family. The day I finally got the car back was anticlimactic. There was no swell of triumphant music, no feeling of victory. After nearly a year of financial bloodletting, I drove to the body shop and paid the final, crippling bill. The car looked okay. From 20 feet away, it was the stunning machine I remembered. But up close, you could see the small imperfections. The way the new passenger door didn't quite line up perfectly with the fender. The subtle difference in the metallic flake of the new paint. It was a beautiful, expensive forgery of its former self, and it drove differently. There was a slight, almost imperceptible vibration at highway speeds, a ghost in the machine that the mechanics swore they couldn't feel, but I knew was there. It was a constant reminder of its brokenness, of my brokenness. Driving it no longer brought me joy. It brought a sickening wave of anxiety. Every pothole, every strange noise sent a jolt of panic through me. I was terrified of it breaking, of needing another repair I couldn't afford. The car I had bought to feel free had become my jailer. The symbol of my success was now a rolling monument to my debt. My life at home had disintegrated. My wife and I were living as strangers under the same roof. The silence was a constant, screaming presence. She was making plans. I could see it in the way she moved, the quiet determination in her eyes. She was detaching, preparing for an escape. The business was on life support. The loans I had taken out against it were a crushing weight. I couldn't make payroll 1 week. I had to let go of my best employee, a man who had been with me since the beginning. It was like cutting off my own arm. The end of my marriage came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was in the garage, polishing the car, a ritual of denial I performed every weekend. She came to the door, her hands clasped in front of her. She told me she was leaving, that she and the kids were going to stay with her sister. She said she had spoken to a lawyer. She wasn't angry, she was just done. "I look at that car," she said, her voice flat, "and I see everything we've lost. I see our savings, our children's future, our happiness. But worse than that, I look at you and I don't see my husband anymore. I see a man who would rather polish a broken machine than look at his own life." She was right. I was a coward. The car was my hiding place. Its perfection, or my pursuit of it, was a distraction from the utter mess I had made of everything that truly mattered. I watched her pack. I watched her explain to the kids that they were going on a trip. I watched my son look from my face to the car in the garage, a flicker of understanding and contempt in his young eyes. I just stood there, paralyzed by the enormity of my failure as she drove away, the sensible, boring family minivan disappearing down the street, taking my entire world with it. That was the bottom. Alone in an empty house with a monstrous debt, a failing business, and a car that mocked me with its flawed, expensive beauty. The crash on that country road hadn't just destroyed a car. It had set off a chain reaction, a slow, grinding demolition of my entire life. I had lost everything. And for what? For a sound, for a feeling, for a stupid, childish dream of what a successful man was supposed to drive. I finally had to sell it. The decision was agonizing, but it was the only path forward. Selling a high-performance car with a major accident on its record is a special kind of hell. Every potential buyer would scrutinize it, their trained eyes finding every flaw. The value had plummeted. I ended up selling it for a catastrophic loss, a number that was less than what I still owed on the personal loans I had taken out to fix it. I handed the keys to the new owner, a young guy with more money than sense, and felt a profound, unexpected wave of relief. The weight was gone. The tumor had been excised. I was left with the scars and the debt, but the disease itself was gone. The next year was about survival. I declared bankruptcy for the business. I sold the house in a short sale, walking away with nothing. I moved into a small, bleak apartment on the other side of town. I got a job working for a rival landscaping company, the ultimate humiliation. I was now an employee, taking orders from a man I used to compete against. My life was a monotonous cycle of hard physical labor and quiet, lonely nights. But in that stripping away of everything, I began to find a strange kind of clarity. Without the business, the big house, the fancy car, I had to confront the man who was left. And he was a man I didn't like very much. He was arrogant, selfish, and had valued things over people. The work of rebuilding myself was harder than any landscaping job. It started with apologies. I wrote my wife a long letter, not asking her to come back, but simply taking full, unadulterated responsibility for my actions. I apologized for my selfishness, for my deafness to her warnings, for prioritizing my ego over our family's well-being. I started calling my kids regularly, not with grand promises, but just to be a presence in their lives, a steady, reliable voice on the phone. It was a slow, painful process. There were setbacks, moments of profound despair. But for every step back, I tried to take 2 steps forward. I started to rebuild my life not around the accumulation of things, but around simple principles: honesty, responsibility, and hard work. I drive a 10-year-old pickup truck now. It's dented, it's rusty in spots, and it smells faintly of fertilizer. It doesn't turn any heads. It doesn't make me feel like a king. But it starts every morning, it gets me to work, and it's paid for. My life is small and simple. I have a mountain of debt that I am slowly, painstakingly paying down. I see my children every other weekend. My relationship with my ex-wife is a work in progress, a fragile truce built on a shared love for our kids. There is no grand, happy ending. I didn't win the lottery or magically restore my fortune. But my life is my own again. I'm not owned by a thing. I learned in the most brutal way imaginable that the things you own can end up owning you. The dream car was a beautiful lie. It promised me freedom and delivered only bondage. My real freedom, I've discovered, is in the quiet satisfaction of a day's hard work, in the sound of my son's laughter on the phone, in the knowledge that I am, finally, after all of it, living an honest life. I don't dream about the sound of that engine anymore. When I sleep now, my dreams are quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I am at peace. I've told you my story, now it's your turn. What's the one experience that showed you people aren't always who they seem? Share your answer in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.